Should we let our expectations of what future generations will think is moral guide how we act now? So I've talked about Popper in a couple of videos on this channel already, but another idea he has that is interesting to me is he raises the question of, should we adhere to the judgment of history? Should we let our expectations of what people in the future will believe and what their moral values we think they will be determine what we should be doing, what we think should be moral? And his answer is, if we shouldn't be letting the standards of the past determine our ideas of morality, we definitely shouldn't be letting what we think the people of the future will, which is interesting because this goes against, I think, what a lot of people believe and what I sort of believed. And so Peter Singer is a really interesting philosopher. He sort of takes, I think, a lot of the assumptions of our society to their logical extreme. And a lot of his stuff he's best known for, like his advocacy of effective altruism and veganism, I am opposed to, I disagree with. Although, as long as you share a lot of assumptions that we make in modern developed Western countries, it's hard to refute a lot of his ideas. But this one in this book, which I haven't read but I mean to, is one I think most people wouldn't want to refute, which is the idea that we will just keep expanding who we consider worthy of moral consideration. Originally, we didn't consider people outside our local clan or tribe as even human, and then we expanded to the people of our nation, and then people of our civilization or race, and then all people, and now we're expanding to animals and environments, and we'll keep expanding indefinitely, is Singer's argument. And I think this is wrong, and I think this is the most important idea of Singer's to actually rebut, and I'm not going to really do that here, but I wanted to bring it up because he is an example of someone who advocates this idea. But it is interesting because this Singer-esque conception is very much like the extreme version of what John Gray describes in The Two Faces of Liberalism. So he argues that you basically had two concepts of liberalism, one of which was expressed by Thomas Hobbes, which was sort of values pluralism, and then the other one was expressed by John Stuart Mill, John Locke, and that was moral universalism, of there is one absolute moral universal we can get at. If you believe that's the case, then you're always sort of striving towards that, which is what Singer would say. And Singer is also interesting because he is someone who genuinely lives what he believes. Most people accept sort of the premises of Singer, but aren't really willing to follow it to their logical conclusion, much less to actually live based on it in the way that Singer has. And I still think he's wrong, but you have to respect that. And so John Gray, I think, provides some insight into why this doesn't make sense in this book. And Robin Dunbar sort of directly addresses Singer, and I didn't pull that book, which is fundamentally we are limited in our moral circles. And when you're trying to treat all people as brothers, what you are basically doing is you are treating people as categories, and then you're not dealing with them as individuals. And that is, in many ways, often worse, I think, than accepting that there are limits to our empathy and compassion and what we can do. But at the same time, I mentioned in my 9 books I really should read that this was one that I knew I should read, but I was putting it off, and I think part of that is that I have a negative stereotype of Thomas Sowell readers. And I read that book between the time I recorded the video and the time I posted it. And then I was impressed enough with this book to start reading this one, which is actually a collection of essays. And first 2 essays were interesting. I might talk about them in future videos. Third essay I was initially hesitant to read because I was looking at it, and it's something like The Real History of Slavery, and I'm like, this sounds like a dozen PragerU videos. But I'm like, well, he has established his credibility with Conflict of Visions and the first 2 essays in this book. So I read it, and I was genuinely impressed. And one point he made in his third essay is, if you think about it, if you actually stop to think about slavery, you realize it is one of the most immoral things that we can do. And yet, for most of human history, nobody questioned it. But once people started questioning it, it became basically inevitable. And even the defenders had to come up with complicated justifications to defend it. And the anti-slavery crusaders won in remarkably short time in the span of human history once this idea took off. And so even though I think that Singer is wrong in the inevitability of the circle expanding, I do think that it makes more sense to consider the kind of questions Singer raises, and we may conclude that the answer is no, but it means actually really thinking about them. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk about that idea in Popper, and then I read the Sowell book and I realized, oh, this kind of connects to several of these things, to Singer and to Gray as well. I don't have a lot more to say on this at the moment, but I probably will have plenty more to say on a number of these topics in the future. Thanks for watching. I'm Magpie, this is Leela, and we'll see y'all in the next one.